I'm Cassandra Lewis, 32, and I watched my parents steal $570,000 from my accounts last spring. Money I'd supposedly saved over 10 years of brutal work hours and careful investing. They thought they were securing my brother Ethan's future, their golden child who could never do wrong. What they didn't know, those accounts were fake. The money was a mirage. I'd spent years setting this trap, knowing exactly what they'd do when temptation arose. Before I tell you how I caught my parents red-handed, let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you've ever dealt with toxic family members who've taken advantage of you. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Growing up in Westport, Connecticut meant a life of material comfort but emotional neglect. Our colonial-style house, with its manicured lawn, projected the perfect family image to neighbors and colleagues of my father, Harold, a corporate attorney, and my mother, Diana, who ran a successful interior design business. From the outside, we were the picture of upper-middle-class success. Inside was a different story. My earliest memories involve understanding a fundamental truth. My brother Ethan was the sun, and our family orbited around him. 5 years younger than me, Ethan learned quickly that tears, tantrums, or charm could get him anything he wanted. My parents reinforced this at every turn. "Cassie, let Ethan play with your science kit," my mother would say when I was 12, even though it was a gift from my grandparents specifically for my interest in chemistry. "But Mom, he'll break it," I'd protest. "Don't be selfish. He's just curious." The inevitable would happen. Broken beakers, spilled solutions, and instead of consequences, Ethan would receive comfort while I received lectures about sharing. This pattern repeated throughout our childhood. When I was 16 and had saved $300 from my summer job at the local library for a laptop I needed for school, my parents borrowed it to buy Ethan an expensive gaming system after he failed 3 classes. "He needs motivation to do better," my father explained, as if my academic success required no support or recognition. The most egregious example came when I was accepted to Brown University. My grandparents had established college funds for both Ethan and me. I'd counted on that money, had based my college decisions around it. 2 months before enrollment, my parents called me into the living room. "Cassandra, we need to discuss your college plans," my father said, glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed financial statements spread across the coffee table. "What about them?" "Orientation is in 6 weeks. My mother twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit. "We've had to make some adjustments to your college fund." Those adjustments meant my entire college fund had been drained to send Ethan to Berkshire Academy, an elite private high school that promised specialized attention for students who learn differently. In reality, it was a place wealthy parents sent troubled kids who couldn't maintain grades or behavior standards in public school. "But what about Brown?" My voice cracked. "You've always been so responsible," my father said. "You can take out loans. Apply for more scholarships. Maybe start at community college. We know you'll figure it out," my mother added. "You always do." That night crystallized everything. I wasn't just less favored, I was expected to sacrifice my future for Ethan's present whims. Something hardened in me then, a determination that would shape the next decade. I did figure it out. I deferred admission, worked 3 jobs for a year, secured additional scholarships, and took minimal loans. I graduated from Brown with a degree in economics and financial mathematics, working part-time throughout college while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. Every achievement was met with the same response from my parents, mild acknowledgement quickly redirected to Ethan's latest crisis or accomplishment, usually the former disguised as the latter. "That's nice, Cassie. Did we tell you Ethan's starting a YouTube channel? He thinks it could really take off." After graduation, I secured a position at a financial management firm in Boston. The distance from Connecticut was deliberate. I needed space to build my life without the constant drain of my family's dynamics. My analytical mind and work ethic served me well in the financial sector. I lived modestly despite my growing income, investing carefully and building genuine wealth. The family visits became predictable performances. My mother would tour my apartment, noting things that needed improving. My father would inquire about my financial situation with thinly veiled interest in specific numbers. Ethan, when he bothered to come, would complain about whatever job he'd recently quit or business venture that had failed, always someone else's fault. These visits inevitably culminated in discussions about family obligations. You know, Cassie, my mother said during one such visit 3 years ago, Ethan is really struggling with his student loans from that business program. The program he dropped out of after one semester? I clarified, serving coffee in my small but immaculate kitchen. He wasn't being challenged appropriately, my father interjected. But the loans remain. We thought, since you're doing so well. I'd heard enough variations of this conversation to predict every beat. My responsibility to contribute to the family meant subsidizing Ethan's irresponsibility. When I refused, I was selfish, cold, unfeeling. Family helps family was my mother's refrain, though the help only seemed to flow in one direction. As my genuine savings and investments grew, so did their interest in my finances. Each conversation became more probing, each visit more focused on what I had and what Ethan needed. The resentment I'd carried since childhood evolved into something more calculated, suspicion, and eventually, certainty about what they would do given the opportunity. That's when the idea first formed. Not just to protect my assets, but to expose the truth about our family dynamic once and for all. If they were willing to steal from me, I needed to know. And I needed proof that would make denial impossible. By my 30th birthday, I'd established myself as something of a rising star at Meridian Financial Management. My client portfolio had grown significantly, and I developed a reputation for both strategic thinking and careful risk assessment. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd learned to anticipate worst-case scenarios from a lifetime of watching my parents prioritize Ethan's wants over my needs. My actual financial situation was solid. 10 years of disciplined saving and strategic investing had built a portfolio worth substantially more than the $570,000 I would eventually dangle as bait. The real accounts were diversified across multiple institutions, with security measures far beyond what most people implement. This wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. Creating the illusion began with establishing digital footprints for accounts that didn't technically exist. I started by opening legitimate accounts at banks different from my primary institutions, depositing minimal amounts to activate them. Then came the meticulous work of generating falsified statements, careful to include the watermarks, account numbers, and fine print that would make them appear authentic. You need to understand the psychology of trust, my colleague Jackson once said during a cybersecurity seminar our firm hosted. People believe documents that look official, especially when they contain details that seem specific and technical. I applied this principle religiously. The fake statements included transaction histories with recognizable vendors, regular deposits matching my salary schedule, and the gradual growth patterns of someone systematically building wealth. I manufactured an investment portfolio showing diversified holdings in familiar companies, Amazon, Apple, Tesla, with performance metrics that mirrored actual market behavior. For 9 months, I dropped subtle references during family calls and visits. Work's been crazy. This market volatility has me checking my portfolios constantly, I mentioned casually during a Sunday phone call with my mother. Portfolios? Multiple, she asked, interest peaking audibly. Just diversifying as I go. Nothing major, I replied, the bait set. During a rare visit home for my father's birthday, I accidentally left my laptop open with a spreadsheet visible showing account summaries and balances. Looks like you're doing quite well for yourself, my father commented, lingering by my computer. I closed the laptop with practiced nonchalance. Just trying to be responsible with what I earn. The spreadsheet had shown a combined total of approximately $570,000, a significant sum, but not so outlandish as to trigger immediate suspicion for someone at my professional level and age. Meanwhile, Ethan's latest crisis was unfolding. After cycling through jobs in marketing, real estate, and restaurant management, he'd convinced our parents to co-sign a loan for a guaranteed opportunity in cannabis distribution just as legalization passed in Connecticut. It's literally a ground floor opportunity, he'd proclaimed at Thanksgiving dinner. Everyone needs supply, and we'll have the distribution network across 3 states. 6 months later, the business had collapsed spectacularly. His partners had vanished with substantial inventory, leaving Ethan with massive debt and our parents on the hook for the loan they'd guaranteed. The amount? Just over $500,000. The timing couldn't have been more perfect for my purposes. My savings milestone had been established in their minds just as a family financial emergency materialized. I noticed my parents' behavior changing subtly. My mother called more frequently, asking detailed questions about my life in Boston. My father began sending articles about helping family members financially and tax benefits of gifts to relatives. "We should really visit you soon," my mother suggested during a call in March. "It's been too long since we've seen your place." "That would be nice," I replied, knowing they hadn't shown interest in visiting in over 2 years. The weekend they suggested happened to coincide with a genuine work conference in Chicago I was scheduled to attend. I mentioned this, watching as disappointment registered in my mother's video call expression. "But I'll be doing a financial systems update before I leave," I added. "I might be hard to reach for about 48 hours while everything transfers." "Systems update?" My father's voice came from somewhere off camera. "Just consolidating some accounts for better interest rates. The bank recommended doing it while I can monitor the process in case of any hiccups." I could practically see the calculation happening behind their eyes. The trap was almost ready. I installed unobtrusive security cameras in my apartment, focusing particularly on my home office. I created convincing but entirely fake online banking portals that would record access attempts. The passwords I used for these decoy accounts were intentionally vulnerable, variations of my birthday, address, and our family dog's name, things my parents might guess if they went looking. Most importantly, I established a tracking system that would document any attempted transfers from these fictitious accounts. If money was moved, I would know exactly when, where, and how much. The night before leaving for Chicago, I called my parents. "Just checking in before my trip. I'll be mostly offline once I start this financial update tomorrow afternoon. Do you need someone to water your plants while you're gone?" my mother asked, too casually. I smiled to myself. No need. It's just a weekend trip, and I have those self-watering globes now. "Well, if you need anything checked on at your place, just let us know. Your father and I could drive up." "Thanks, but everything's set. I'll call when I'm back Sunday night." As I packed for Chicago, I deliberately left financial folders labeled account summaries and investment portfolio visible on my desk. Inside were the carefully crafted statements showing my fictitious wealth. In the top drawer, I placed a handwritten note with account access information, including the vulnerable passwords. The trap was set. All that remained was to see if they would take the bait. The Financial Technology Conference in Chicago provided perfect cover. I gave my presentation on risk assessment in digital banking Friday morning, networking with colleagues throughout the afternoon. No one would find it strange that I was particularly interested in security measures and breach detection. It was literally what I was there to discuss. While maintaining a professional presence at the conference, I monitored the security feed from my apartment on my tablet during breaks. Friday passed without incident. Saturday morning, I participated in a panel discussion, my phone silenced but visible on the table before me. At 1:17 p.m., the security alert flashed on my screen. Motion detected in my apartment. Excusing myself from the post-panel networking, I found a quiet corner in the hotel lobby and opened the security app. The footage showed my parents entering my apartment using the spare key I'd given them for emergencies years ago. I feel terrible about this, my mother said, glancing around nervously as they entered. My father's response was immediate. We're just checking on things while she's away. She'd want us to make sure everything's secure during this financial update she mentioned. They moved with purpose toward my home office, not bothering to check the kitchen or living room, the areas one would typically check on if genuinely concerned about an apartment's security. In my office, my father immediately went to my desk while my mother stood watch at the door. "Harold, hurry," she urged. "What if she has one of those video doorbells or something?" "She doesn't," he replied confidently. "I checked when we came in. Besides, she's in Chicago until tomorrow night." I watched as he methodically opened drawers, quickly finding the folder of financial statements. His expression changed as he reviewed the documents, eyebrows rising, a small smile forming at the corners of his mouth. "Diana, look at this," he called softly. "Our Cassie has been quite the saver." My mother abandoned her post at the door, coming to look over his shoulder. "Is that over $500,000? How is that possible?" "She's always been frugal. And with her salary at the firm." He continued searching, finding the handwritten note with account access information. "This is exactly what we need. This could solve everything with Ethan's situation." "But we can't just take it," my mother protested weakly. "It's her money." My father's justification came quickly. "We're not taking it. We're borrowing it to save this family from financial ruin. Once Ethan gets back on his feet, we'll replace it. Cassie has always been the responsible one. She wouldn't want her brother to suffer when she has the means to help." "She's refused to help before," my mother reminded him. "Because she didn't understand the severity. This is different. The bank is threatening foreclosure on our home because of that loan. What would happen to family holidays? Where would everyone gather for Christmas? Cassie wouldn't want that." I watched their moral reasoning deteriorate in real time. It was fascinating in a detached, almost clinical way, like observing subjects in a psychological experiment. They spent the next hour accessing the fake banking portals I'd created, using the passwords from my note. The sites looked legitimate, with the same interfaces and security features as real banking websites, but they were elaborate facades I'd built with help from a programmer friend who owed me a favor. "It's asking for a verification code," my father said, frowning at the screen. My mother pointed to my cell phone bill on the desk. "Use her phone number. They usually send codes to your phone." He entered my number, and seconds later, the dummy system generated a fake authentication message to a burner phone I had set up. They input the code, gaining access to accounts showing combined balances of $570,000. "This is it," my father breathed. "This will fix everything." They initiated a transfer of the entire amount to my parents' joint account, an account number I recognized because I'd seen it on documents throughout my childhood. The system showed a processing animation, then a confirmation screen with a transaction number. "We did it," my mother said, but her voice held no triumph. "Should we leave a note?" My father hesitated. "No. We'll call her tomorrow evening when she's back. We'll explain everything then. She'll understand once we tell her about the foreclosure risk." "What if she doesn't?" My mother's voice was small. "She will," he insisted. "Family comes first. Cassie knows that." They carefully replaced everything as they'd found it, erased the browsing history on my computer, and left the apartment, locking the door behind them. From my hotel room in Chicago, I watched the entire process, recording every moment. The money they thought they'd transferred was never real. The confirmation number they'd received would lead nowhere. But the evidence of their attempted theft was now documented irrefutably. Despite knowing this moment would come, despite planning for it meticulously, I felt a hollow sensation in my chest. Intellectual preparation couldn't completely shield me from the emotional reality. My parents had just stolen over $500,000 from me without a moment's genuine hesitation. Their justifications, family obligation, Ethan's needs, temporary borrowing, were transparent lies they told themselves to maintain their self-image as good parents. I closed my laptop and stared out the window at Chicago's skyline. 10 years of suspicion confirmed in a single afternoon. The trap had worked perfectly. Now came the harder part, the confrontation. Sunday evening, I returned to Boston. My flight landed at 6:42 p.m., and I took a rideshare directly to my apartment. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. My parents had been careful to leave no trace of their visit. If not for the security footage, there would be no evidence they'd been there at all. I unpacked methodically, then sat at my desk and opened my actual laptop, not the decoy I'd left visible. For 3 hours, I reviewed the footage again, taking notes and preparing for what would come next. At precisely 10 p.m., I called my parents' home phone. "Hello." My mother answered, her voice casual. "Mom? It's Cassie." I worked to keep my voice panicked, unsteady. "Something's happened. Something really bad." "Cassie? What's wrong? Are you okay?" Her concern sounded genuine, which only amplified the hypocrisy. "My accounts, my savings, my investments, they're empty. Over $500,000 gone." I allowed my voice to crack. "I just got back from Chicago and checked everything, and it's all gone." A pause. Then, "Oh my God. Are you sure? Could it be some kind of banking error?" "The transactions show a transfer to another account yesterday afternoon, while I was in Chicago." "Mom, I've been robbed." Another pause, longer this time. I heard muffled voices, my mother covering the receiver to speak to my father. "Have you called the police?" she finally asked. "Not yet. I'm trying to understand what happened first. The bank's fraud department is closed until morning." I took a deep breath. "I thought I should call you and Dad. I don't know what to do." Maybe you should come home for a few days," my mother suggested tentatively. "Until this gets sorted out." "That's actually a good idea. I'll drive down tonight. I'm too upset to sleep anyway." "Tonight? It's already so late. I need to be around family right now, Mom." I emphasized the word family slightly. "I'll be there in a few hours." Before she could protest further, I ended the call and began packing an overnight bag. Inside went a laptop containing all the evidence, a portable printer, and several USB drives with backup copies of everything. The 3-hour drive to Connecticut would give my parents time to panic, to contemplate their options, to perhaps convince themselves I couldn't possibly know it was them. The night was clear, the highway nearly empty. I drove with mechanical precision, mind cycling through the confrontation scenarios I'd anticipated. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway at 1:30 a.m., lights were still on in the living room. They'd been waiting up, as I'd expected. My mother opened the door before I could knock, pulling me into a hug that felt rehearsed. "Oh, sweetie. Come in, come in. Your father's in the living room." I entered the familiar space, noting nothing had changed in the decor for nearly a decade. My father stood awkwardly by the fireplace, hands in his pockets. "Cassie, we were so worried when you called." "Were you?" I set my bag down carefully. "Of course we were," my mother interjected. "To think that someone could just take all your money like that, it's terrifying." I nodded slowly. "It is terrifying. Betrayal usually is." Something in my tone made them both stiffen slightly. My father cleared his throat. "Have you learned anything more about the transfer? Any leads on who might have done this?" "Actually, yes." I unzipped my bag and removed my laptop. "I know exactly who did it." That's good," my mother said uncertainly. "The police should be able to track them down then." "No need for police. The culprits are in this room." The silence that followed was absolute. My father recovered first. "Cassandra, you're upset." "Understandably so. But you need to be careful about making accusations." "It's not an accusation when I have proof." I opened my laptop and turned it to face them. "Yesterday at 1:17 p.m., you entered my apartment using the spare key. By 1:24, you were searching my office. By 2:03, you had transferred, or thought you had transferred, every cent of my savings to your joint account. The security footage played silently, showing them moving through my apartment with purpose. Their faces on the screen drained of color as they watched themselves commit the theft in high-definition clarity. You were spying on us? My mother whispered. No, mother. I was protecting myself from theft. There's a significant difference. My father attempted a different approach. Cassandra, you don't understand. We're facing foreclosure because of the loan for Ethan's business. We were desperate. Save it, I cut him off. I heard every word of your justifications on the video. Family comes first. She's always been the responsible one. She wouldn't want her brother to suffer. I mimicked his tone perfectly. Did it ever occur to you to actually ask me for help instead of stealing from me? We've asked before, my mother said defensively. You always refuse. I refuse to enable Ethan's irresponsibility. There's a difference between helping and perpetuating harmful patterns. I pulled out a stack of papers from my bag. But that's not even the point right now. The point is that you committed theft and fraud. We were going to tell you, my father insisted. We were going to call you tonight, after you got back from Chicago. Explain everything. After the money was already gone. After I couldn't stop you. I shook my head. Do you know what the penalty is for identity theft in Massachusetts? For unauthorized access of financial accounts? For elder financial abuse? Elder abuse? My mother looked genuinely confused. You're 32. The law applies to anyone over 18 in many jurisdictions. The penalties start at 5 years imprisonment and up to $250,000 in fines. Per incident. My father's attorney instincts finally engaged. You can't prove intent. We have access to your apartment. You've given us passwords before. Not to these accounts. And the video captures your explicit statements of intent quite clearly. I turned the volume up on a segment where he specifically mentioned taking the money to solve Ethan's problems. As if summoned by the mention of his name, the front door opened and Ethan walked in. His timing couldn't have been more perfect if I'd orchestrated it. What's going on? Mom texted that Cassie was coming over with some emergency. He looked around at our tense faces. What did I miss? Your parents stole $500,000 from me to bail you out of your latest failure, I said flatly. Ethan's expression cycled through confusion, shock, and then, most tellingly, calculation. $500,000? You had that much just sitting around? And you never offered to help when my business was tanking. His reaction confirmed everything. Not outrage at the theft, but outrage that I hadn't volunteered the money earlier. See? I gestured toward him. This is exactly the problem. None of you see anything wrong with taking what I've earned. Family helps family, my mother repeated her mantra weekly. Funny how that rule only applies when Ethan needs something. I turned back to my laptop. But here's what you don't know. What none of you know. I pulled up another screen, the back end of the fake banking system I'd created. The money doesn't exist. My parents and Ethan stared at the screen, incomprehension slowly giving way to confusion. What do you mean it doesn't exist? My father finally asked. I mean exactly that. The accounts you accessed were fake. The statements you found were fabricated. The banking portals were dummy sites I created specifically to track unauthorized access. I navigated through the system, showing the elaborate construction behind the facade. The $570,000 you thought you were stealing was never real. That's impossible, my father protested. We saw the transaction go through. We got a confirmation number. All part of the illusion. The money never moved because it never existed in the first place. I turned to face them directly. What did exist? What does exist? Is evidence of attempted theft, conspiracy, and fraud. My mother sank onto the couch, her face ashen. I don't understand. Why would you do this? Because I needed to know if you would actually steal from me given the opportunity. I needed to know if all my suspicions about how you view me as nothing more than Ethan's backup plan were true. I closed the laptop. And now I know. Ethan, ever the opportunist, jumped in. So there's no money? This was all some sick test. No, Ethan. There is money. just not in the accounts you tried to drain. I've been working and investing for 10 years. Did you really think I'd leave my entire net worth vulnerable to theft? This is insane, my father said, running a hand through his thinning hair. You set us up. Entrapped us. Entrapment is when someone is induced to commit a crime they wouldn't otherwise commit. I didn't force you to break into my financial accounts. I didn't compel you to transfer funds without permission. You did that all on your own. My voice remained steady. I simply created an opportunity and observed your choices. What are you going to do? My mother's voice was barely audible. Are you going to the police? The question hung in the air. This was the moment I'd played out in my mind countless times over the years of planning. That depends on what happens next. What do you want? My father asked, the attorney in him recognizing a negotiation opening. Money? We clearly don't have any to give you. I want accountability. I want acknowledgement of what you've done, not just yesterday, but throughout my life. I want you to admit that you've consistently prioritized Ethan's wants over my needs, that you've treated me as a resource rather than a daughter. That's not true, my mother protested feebly. It is true. And now I have irrefutable proof of just how true it is. I removed more documents from my bag, printouts of the video screenshots, transcripts of their conversations in my apartment, and copies of the fake transfer confirmations. I've documented everything. If you can't acknowledge the truth, these go to the authorities. The reality of their situation finally seemed to dawn on them. My father's legal mind was undoubtedly calculating the potential consequences, criminal charges, public humiliation, professional ruin. What exactly do you want us to do? He asked carefully. First, I want a written admission of what you did and why you did it. Second, I want you both to attend family therapy, real therapy, not just a couple of sessions for show. Third, I want financial transparency going forward. I need to know exactly what obligations you've committed to in Ethan's name. I turned to my brother. And you? You're the only one who doesn't seem to grasp the severity of what's happened. Your entitlement nearly sent our parents to prison. Ethan's expression darkened. So this is my fault now? You're the one who set up this whole fake money scheme. No, the scheme revealed the truth. Your lifetime of